As I mentioned in the previous lecture, we can also have member functions as members within our struct definitions. A member function is a function that is defined or at least declared within the definition of a struct. We will discuss how we can separate out the declarations and definitions in a future lecture. For now, we are going to define the full function within the body of the struct definition. These member functions can be used to get or set the state of an instance of the struct, so in other words, the values that are stored within the members. They can also be used to calculate things, and you can pass in arguments and return values from these functions as you can do with regular non-member functions. With many class and struct definitions, we have a toString function that will display the state of that. So in this case, I'm simply displaying hello from entity. But in this example, I'm displaying the member. So we have cout entity member, and then we print out the member. We do not need to access the member in a special way. It is defined within that body, so we can simply access that right here. We simply specify the identifier member, and that will then print out the value that is stored within that integer in this example. So how do we invoke this member function? Well, firstly we have to instantiate the particular struct. In this case we have entity. I name the instance variable here entity with a lowercase. Then I provide some initializers, some values here to construct the entity with. I pass in 47, so the member will be initialized to 47. Now we can access the members again using the dot operator. So just like how we could access the member variable using the dot operator, we also access the member functions using the dot operator. So I do entity dot toString parentheses. Again, this is a function, so we provide parentheses. Of course, the parentheses is where you would specify arguments if you had arguments to provide for the function, and you end the statement off again with the semicolon. From this, we can see that we can have variables as members, also referred to as data members, and then we can have member functions, and you access both of those with the dot operator. Typically with structs, your data members and your member functions are accessible directly in this way, but in the future we will learn how we can hide some members. We can typically hide the data members, so the member variables, from outside access, so you cannot access it directly in this way. You can only sort of get or set those through member functions, because often we want to do checks and stuff like that, right? So we will also discuss that in a bit more detail in a future lecture. But for now, let's go and look at an example in Visual Studio. Okay, as before, I have the struct entity defined. We have an integer member, so that is the data member, but we also have a member function, void toString, and in this case we do cout entity member. So what is that member? And we print out a member here. We can access that specifying the identifier here, member. Then in the main function I instantiate that, so we have entity. Then we can do cout entity.member, and just to test here I will build a run so we can see what we get. Notice we get 0, and that's because we have not specified any values for the construction, so within the braces. So let's go back here and we specify 47, and now the member will be initialized to 47 instead of 0. Okay, so now instead of using the console output statement, we can use the toString function, because that is going to give us the member as well. So I'll actually comment out this line, cout entity.member, I will comment that out. Now we only have entity.toString, and if we build a run, we get 47. Alright, and that is how we can use a member function. Again, we can see that it is similar to accessing a member with the dot operator. Notice that as I type out the dot, so the dot operator, we get this list here. We have toString and we have member. I mentioned previously that IntelliSense will help us out here, and so we can type that out, and we can then press tab or space once that is selected, and that will then finish that identifier so that we don't have to type out the entire thing. It will complete that identifier for us. So again, when you get to a point where you have multiple members and some of them can be similar or they can have long names, then this can be a useful feature, especially also since it lists some additional information on that. It shows you the declaration. That is useful for not just data members, but also for member functions in seeing what they return and also what they may expect in terms of arguments. Again, these are simple examples, simple structs, but we may not always know what functions or data members we have available. So in this way, we can scroll through read some comments and additional information on those, and then use the appropriate function, for example, instead of having to go through the entire header to find the particular function, or maybe having to go and read documentation on the definition. So again, this feature is very handy. Other IDEs have a very similar feature set. With the particular member selected, we can press Tab or space to complete that. So once it is listed, you can press Tab or space to select that particular member. You can also actually complete the word as it is called, or complete the identifier, by continuing on with your typing. So for example, if you were to do another dot, you would select the particular member, so member in this case, or toString, and then you would continue on. So you would then, with that selected, press dot, or in the case with the toString member function, we would have that selected, and then we would press the opening bracket so we can complete the parentheses, and then in that way we can see we get the parentheses. We don't have to complete the word and then type parentheses. We can simply have that selected and then press the opening bracket, and that will then complete those. This IntelliSense feature is called List Members, and if it goes away, so if this menu here, this pop-up goes away, maybe you don't have something selected when you press spacebar, for example, or you click on something and then the list goes away and you want that back, you don't have to delete the dot. You can do the dot again and then that will show up again, but you can also press Ctrl J, and that is under Edit, IntelliSense. You can see you have the different options here, list members and so on, parameter information and so on. So again, that is Ctrl J, and that is a simple shortcut. Some of the other shortcuts are a bit longer, and then we can start typing. And for example, let's say we have toString selected here, we can simply press the opening bracket, and that will then complete the parentheses. It will complete the word, and it will complete the parentheses as well. With the typing caret within the toString function, for example, that member function, you will see the toString member highlight. We can press Ctrl K, Ctrl I to list the information on this. Similar to when we had this selected in the list member feature, we now get this information. Notice that our comments actually show up in here. The same thing with our data members, so our member variables, with our typing caret on the member here. So you can click on that. On the member, you will notice that you will notice the member is highlighted. It is not selected, but it is sort of highlighted. We can again press Ctrl K, Ctrl I for the information, and it will show us the declaration for that member. So what is the type of the member? We can see some comments and so forth. Same thing with our functions, as I mentioned. It will show us what it is going to return, the parameters that we may expect, and so forth. So this is very useful just for a quick glance into what is going on. What is the particular data member? What is its type and so forth? And then for functions, what do they return? What are the parameters? And so forth. So that is quick info. We also have parameter info, so that will give us the parameter information. When we have the typing caret within parentheses, we can press Ctrl Shift Spacebar, or we can go and click on that option in the Edit IntelliSense menu. But of course the shortcuts will be faster here. Then we can see what the parameter info is. We can see the declaration, and this is to give us a sense of what the function will return, but also what the parameters are, so what arguments the function will expect. For example, let's say we had some member function that will print out an integer. Let's go and define one now, because this parameter does not make sense with the toString function here. So we will print out the argument integer. Formal parameter is x, so we will modify this to x here. And actually I'll just go and remove that formal parameter for the toString function. Now again, how do we invoke this? We do entity dot, and we get the list, and we can do print int here. All right, we pass in a 47, for example, or some integer, and we get that value printed out again. All right, so again, our member functions can also accept arguments. And for a quick look at the parameter info, we can do Ctrl Shift Spacebar, and also notice that our comments show up. So we can modify this comment here. The member function will print the argument integer, Ctrl Shift Spacebar, and we can see that that shows up in this as well, along with the declaration of that function.